Hey guys, and welcome back to another video. In this video, I thought I would show you how I record and mix my saxophone. Now, I record saxophones here in my home studio all the time for Norwegian TV productions like The Voice, Idol, Dancing with the Stars, The Masked Singer, and many others. I record for different artists, and I record for TV commercials and film. Now, while I don't usually mix the saxophone myself, I do mix all the saxophone for my social media videos. And I've spent a lot of time in Pro Tools trying to figure out how to make my saxophone sound as good as possible. Now, an important disclaimer, I'm not a professional mixer. I'm a saxophone player first. But if you are a professional and you're going to mix some saxophone, I think you can still pick up some tips and tricks from this video. It'll be sort of a player's approach to recording and mixing saxophone. Now, if you're a saxophone player just looking to improve the recordings you make of yourself, then this video is perfect for you. Now let's jump into Pro Tools. I'm going to show you everything I do, from the gear I use to record, how I'm routing everything, and what plugins I use to make my saxophone sound great. So first up, let's create an audio track. This is going to be a mono audio track. I'm going to name it Sax, and it's coming from analog one on my Audient ID44 sound card. That's connected to this Warm Audio 47 microphone that you're currently hearing me speak through. I think this microphone sounds fantastic on saxophone, and I actually prefer it to a lot of the stuff they put in front of me in professional studios. It is a relatively cheap mic for what you're getting, and I'm absolutely in love with the way this thing sounds. Now, first up, I'm just going to record some saxophone through this microphone so you can hear what it sounds like completely dry with no plugins whatsoever. The only thing that's happening to the sound on the way in is that I got a little high pass filter on the sound card. I like to place the mic relatively close to my saxophone to get the most amount of warmth to it. About like this distance seems to be the sweet spot for me. I've experimented a lot with this, and I find if I go too close, then the sound sounds unnatural because the sound is coming out of all the keys and out of the bell of the saxophone, and you want to capture the entire instrument, not just the bell. But if you go too far away from the mic, you lose some of that warmth that you really want in your sound. All right, I'm going to record some saxophone now so you can hear what it sounds like completely dry. Alright, just a little bit of saxophone noodling there, so we have something to work with. So you just heard it completely dry going into Pro Tools. Now let's start adding some EQ to the saxophone. I like to place a 7-band EQ directly onto the saxophone track. The first thing I'll do is I'll take out some of the harsh frequencies. And I find those to be usually around 3000 hertz on the sax, or on my saxophone sound. Like, this will vary from saxophone player to saxophone player as well. But let's take a listen to what it sounds like when I take out some of the harsh frequencies. So that's better, but now it sounds a little bit dead in the top end. So I'm going to add some more top end above what I just took out. Just a little bit here. Let's take a listen to what that sounds like. Just adding a little bit of top end to give it some sparkle. Now, I already have a high pass filter on this microphone going in, so I don't need to do that again, but I'm going to add in some low end as well to give it even more warmth. Now that's a pretty drastic lift in the low end, but what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take some of it back out just to make it a little bit more smooth. I'm going to do this with the low middle frequencies. Now take a listen to what it sounds like when I start taking out some of these frequencies. back in. Now that sounds good to me. Let's take a listen before and after all this EQing. I think I went a little bit hard on the low end, so let's take it down a notch. That's better. So now let's move on to add some compression to this. And I like to add a compression on a separate track, just so that I can add the compression underneath the natural sound of the saxophone. That way it's not going to make it sound unnatural, it's just going to be adding a little bit of warmth underneath. So I'm going to make a stereo aux input here and name it compression. And on this I'm going to put a Bomb Factory plugin. I think this compression sounds really nice. I'm going to route the saxophone track to this compression. Now I'm going to tweak the input here so that it compresses the saxophone sound pretty drastically. But afterwards, I'm going to turn the compression off and just slowly fade it into the normal saxophone track to make it sound balanced. Now that's a lot of compression, so let's take it out completely and then fade it back in until we find that sweet spot. So let's take a listen to what that sounded like before and what it sounds like with the compressor. With. Without. With. Now it's not only louder, but it's also a lot warmer when I add in that compressor. So now the next step is to get this saxophone to sound like it's coming from an actual space. My studio is really dry. That means it's flexible. When I go into Pro Tools, I can change the reverb and the sound of what room I'm in, depending on what I'm recording for. For most of my social media videos, I like a relatively short reverb and a little bit of a slapback, just to make it sound like it's coming from this room, the one you're seeing on the video. But if I'm doing more of a performance video, I like a little bit more reverb on the sound. So these settings are gonna vary a little bit depending on what kind of content I make. But the first step is that I want to add a delay to the saxophone, because this mic is fairly close to my saxophone when I'm recording. And that is an unnatural way to listen to a saxophone. Like, how often do you have a saxophone right next to your ears? So I want to try to move this saxophone a little bit further away and place it in a space. And I do this by adding a slapback delay. So let's make a stereo aux track again and name this slap. On this, I'm just going to add a delay using a default delay that came with Pro Tools. I think it sounds great. 50 milliseconds on one side and 80 milliseconds on the other side. I do different times on each side just to help get some stereo sound to the saxophone that's recorded in mono. And here's a little trick that I've figured out, and that is to add a low pass filter to both the sides of this slapback. I added around 1500 just to take out all of those higher and harsher frequencies of my sound. And this slapback now is going to be adding warmth to my saxophone sound as well. So when I route my saxophone track to this slapback, again, just put it at 0 decibels so that I can gradually introduce the slapback onto the sax track. So let's take a listen to what this sounds like. So right away, that sounds so much better. It's not like the saxophone is coming from inside your head anymore. It's coming from the space around you. So let's take another listen with and without this slapback. With. might tweak the volume of this a little bit more when I add the reverb as well. But this slapback really enables me to not put so much reverb on the sax. It's going to sound really nice and close, but without sounding harsh and like it's coming from inside your head. And if you've ever played a wind instrument with in-ear monitoring, this is what I'm talking about. You know, it sounds like it's coming like from directly inside, in between your ears. You want to spread this out to make it sound like it's coming from a space, not just a super close mic on your saxophone bell. Now let's add in some reverb as well. And I'm gonna do this also on an aux track. Name this reverb. And I just purchased a new plugin that we're going to use, and this is the Universal Audio Lexicon plugin. A legendary reverb that sounds really good. I just purchased this yesterday, so it's all new to me, but I'm going to try to set it up the way I want it to sound. I'm going to use a chamber, and again, here I'm going to not have so much mids, but more reverb in the bass frequencies. Again, this is to add more warmth and depth to my saxophone sound and cut it a little bit in the high end because I have a really bright saxophone sound. I'll put the crossover around 3K because that is where, you know, we removed some of those harsh frequencies earlier. So I know that's where they're starting. Let's put these sliders just in the middle here somewhere and start tweaking it a little bit. And this is set to solo here, because I want to introduce this reverb to the saxophone track as a 100% wet reverb. Now let's route the saxophone to this reverb, 0 decibels. Let's take a listen to what it sounds like. Well, that sounds like a good amount of reverb to me. Now let's introduce that into the saxophone sound as well. Now, again, this is something that I will change up depending on what kind of video I make. Like for a performance video, I'll put it a lot louder and a lot longer. For a more of an educational video, I'll probably go all the way down to like here somewhere. Let's check out how this sounds. And maybe I'll put it to room, actually, for that. A really short reverb. Now that sounds pretty good. That sounds like a natural sounding room. And if it's a performance, you know, I'll go back to chamber, crank it up a little bit, especially if it's like a ballad or something. But this is something you need to play around with depending on the whatever you're recording for. Let's take another listen to before and after. Now this is my saxophone sound coming in completely dry from the microphone. And here is with everything that we've added. That sounds really good to me. This is something I've spent a lot of time just trying to tweak these settings and find what I think works for me, especially as a player myself. It's so good to just know my way around Pro Tools so that when I record saxophone, I can make it sound comfortable and get the most out of my performance. Especially this slapback trick really just changed everything for me. It made it so much more comfortable to record myself. Now, if you're a professional sound engineer and you have any tips or tweaks to my setup, I would love to hear from you. Or if you're someone who's still figuring things out and have any questions, please do let me know in the comments. I hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure you like it and subscribe to my channel for more videos like this. I'll see you in the next one.